Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Raise Your Bars podcast. I'm Al Rattan with my good friend Chris Baker. Chris, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing wonderful. It's always a pleasure to get on the podcast and chat with you and share our sort of thoughts with our audience, which is good. So always look forward to that.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm excited about that because I've been looking at the stats and actually the downloads are growing, the engagement is
Mhm.
growing on my end. And I know, so I post mine on my Lead from the Driver's Seat podcast channel, and Chris posts his on his
Maximize your potential.
Maximize Your Potential podcast. I was going to say the other words, but I didn't. And so on a Maximize Potential podcast, so you may be listening to these on one or the other, and whichever one you're listening to it on, we do appreciate you you tuning in
Mm,
and listening
we
to
do.
our ramblings. To our ramblings. Sometimes we're a little more organized than the other. This time we're just going to go off the cuff and just share our thoughts. So I just started recently a mastermind group, and we've actually just gone through chapter 1 with a group of leaders on John Maxwell's book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, which is, probably John's, masterpiece of books, right? And that he wrote 25 years ago.
Wow.
He did the first one, right? And then 10 years later he did a 10th anniversary one, and then
Mhm.
just last year, so I guess it'll be 26 years now, just last year the 25th anniversary edition of it came out with some updates that he did. And it's sort of the leadership bible, I guess you could say, right?
Right.
Like he's
Right.
identified these 21 laws that leaders need to really study and understand and even try their best to live by in order to be successful. And I think it's a
Mm.
great formula for leaders to follow. And Chris and I were just talking beforehand, and I think just because of something he just wrapped up, which he'll tell you about in a minute, we're going to talk about John's law, which is a chapter 3 of the book. It's the law of process. And it simply says this: leadership develops daily, not in a day. Leadership develops daily, not in a day. And Chris, I just want to sort of throw it back to you because, with the training and leadership development you've been doing with Disney, you're seeing that company, which is obviously a very successful organization, investing in this development for leaders. So why don't you
Yeah.
just share a little bit about that, maybe why they do it and why they believe, really they're following the law of process.
Yeah. It's interesting because prior to COVID, there was a sort of I guess a more widespread program called the Emerging Leaders Program that was taking sort of hourly cast members, putting them in leadership roles, putting them mirroring or sort of matching them with somebody else that they would live the role of a leader for I think it was 8 weeks solid,
Okay.
and it was a good program. It was a good program. After that, the cast went back to being hourly cast until they would secure a leadership position. And then COVID really stopped a lot of investment in training and development, which is a real shame, right? Because it's
Right.
probably the time when it should have ramped
Ramp
up
it
and
up.
escalated rather than
Exactly.
cut back. And just within the division that I work for within Disney, which is engineering services, although I'm not an engineer. I'm there because of my people skills, let's put it that way, and
Mhm.
leadership. We highlighted the fact that that there wasn't really any leadership development being done. And so over the last year or so, excuse me, we've been working on a four-tiered program. And the first one that we've actually launched was earlier this year, a new version of the Emerging Leaders, and we rewrote it. Um, and we asked for nominations from each different area and of people that they thought were showing potential leadership um, ability, right? But just
Right.
needed that help. And the difference is we didn't take them and we didn't do like an 8 week full grown you're into leadership, just go and do it. We wanted to stop and say, what are the skills that you need to develop to become a leader? And
Mm.
so what we do is we have 6 4-hour sessions, and then the final session is a graduation, where we go through a lot of different things. So we do DISC, and we've decided that within our division of Disney, which is quite a big one, DISC is going to be the communication language that we use.
Wonderful. Excellent.
We do talk about emotional intelligence, empathy, inclusion, active listening, prioritizing and scheduling using my priority quadrant, and um,
Mm.
taking a bit of the Pareto principle from John's book, Developing the
All
Leader
right.
Within You 2.0.
Yeah.
And I teach various different things within that class, and it's really to help them grow and grow their confidence.
Hmm.
We talk about conflict resolution, we talk about coaching, um, we talk about, as I say, active listening, strategic thinking, critical thinking,
Yeah.
all of these things that the we're basically teaching them again how to think rather than telling them what to think, right?
Yeah.
And
It's really good.
we did the first class earlier this year. We learned from that. We developed, we tweaked it a little bit, and we've just literally this Monday wrapped up the second class. And there were 20, there was 16 graduated the first class. It was a pilot one, and there was 26 that graduated this class. So
Wow.
42 future leaders have gone through it, and
Right.
they're from all areas of Disney, from like Disney Cruise Line, from transportation, from horticulture, pest management, engineering services, um, what else? Technicians, laundry, textile,
Wow.
everything that's all within that. So you bring these
Yeah.
together, and they basically grow so much in these 3.5 months. And it's really interesting because the graduation involves a presentation that they do, like a 3 to 5 minute presentation. And when we do that, we have their leaders, leaders, we have executives, and even a senior vice president came. um,
Wow.
and the we give them 6 topics to think about and talk about, and most of them we're talking about how they've grown their understanding of communication, right? How they realized that maybe they were missing the S, right, the supportive caring side of things, and that they have to work on that. They talked about how active listening is huge, and by doing that they've actually forged greater relationships with their peers as well as their leaders. How some of them came in saying that they didn't expect to get a lot out of it because they've never got much out of leadership books before and so
Yeah.
on, but
Yeah.
they've grown so much as leaders and their confidence through this that they can't believe it. One even said he's doing an MBA, and he said he's got more out of this 6-session 3-month class than he's got out of his MBA.
That's
Right. So
amazing.
it's a phenomenal experience.
Awesome.
But why are we doing it? To get to the point, because we got so much talent within the organization that we're not
Right.
leveraging,
Yeah.
right? And the process comes in because we're not born leaders, right? But
Exactly.
leadership can be
Exactly.
taught,
Yeah.
but it's got to be consistent, and done well, obviously consistently done every day, right?
Yeah.
And it comes back to bars. The behaviors and the actions is what we're teaching, because that will generate the results and success.
That's what they want. Now, I know with a lot of companies have just promoted because, oh, they've been there the longest, so let's give them a
Right.
leadership role. But I think more often than not, we see people failing
Hmm.
because of that, right? Because they aren't
Absolutely.
really truly prepared. So
Yeah.
Disney's taken this step saying, okay, well, before we need the leaders, let's start developing the people. So when we need a
Yeah.
leader, they're ready to step into that
Exactly.
role and at least have
Yeah.
a baseline of skill set in order to set them up for success versus throwing somebody in literally into the, into the fire and seeing if they sink or swim.
Yeah.
And I
And
think a lot of organizations have fallen into that trap of the sink or swim.
right. And a lot of people will think in the terms, and a lot of probably companies think in the terms of like, hey, when they're a leader, they can act like a leader, right?
Right.
Whereas I tell them right from day one, listen, you're all leaders now. And they go, no, no, we're not. And I said, yes, you are. You haven't got it in your title,
Right.
but you influence other people. And if you influence other
Exactly.
people, they're going to follow you. And if
Hmm.
someone's following you, what does that make you?
Right.
You're a leader,
Leader.
right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, let's learn how to lead and be intentional about it.
Exactly. And I think, and one thing that John says too, once you get into the leadership role, it's too late to train to be a leader.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
you can, and let's face it, people being put into a leadership role or authority or other over others, or having direct reports, however you want to say it,
Hmm.
um, being in there too soon, too young, too mature, not having the skill set, the communication style, the ability to listen effectively, and basically influence and win over their team, so to speak, can do a lot of damage.
Yeah. Oh, huge.
Yeah,
Huge.
yeah,
And
and
there's
cost a
that
lot of
saying
money.
that the saying that people don't leave organizations, they leave bad leaders, right?
Exactly.
And the problem being is if you just promote people into a leadership position, because they may be the top performer or they may have been there the longest,
Hmm.
doesn't mean they're going to be a great leader, right? Not naturally. You
Right.
and so invest in that. And really, it's not money because I work for Disney, so they're not paying anything for that in
They
terms
all
of
hurt.
that. It's really
They,
the disc assessments and so on,
yeah.
but it's the time
Right.
because they've given each of these hourly cast members 4 hours every other week of training time.
Right.
All right, that's invaluable.
Yeah.
Invaluable. It's taking them away from their day-to-day work and and helping them to see how they can create more time, how they can make better create connections, how they can
Hmm.
forge relationships and bonds that are going to benefit not only them but the company in the long run. All right. So
Exactly.
we really encourage people, even if you're hiring somebody in to do it because you don't have people within um, your organization. Because again, let's face it, to be honest, you need specialist qualified people to be able to do this, right?
Yes.
You
Yeah.
can't just put any Tom, Dick, or Harry in there and say, hey, teach leadership.
Front of a class, read this script. Right. That
Right.
doesn't really work.
It doesn't work because what man, and I had a fellow facilitator who's a former military. And what we did is that we've got the content, but what we did is we related it to our personal experiences. And
Right.
that's
Yeah.
what makes
Great.
it real.
Yep. Yep.
Right? So it's not just reading a script out of a book that anybody could do. You might as well just go and buy a book if you're going to do that,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
So yes, we're teaching these skills, but how do they relate in real life, right?
Yeah. I
And
know
then
when I'm
how
doing
can
my
you
disc
use it?
Yeah, when I'm doing my disc workshops, I'm trying to I weave into their personal stories and examples, and in a lot of cases, stories that make me look bad because of the failures and the mistakes I made over the years before I understood some of the principles of disc, or some of the
Exactly.
principles that John teaches, right?
Yeah.
So just something really quick out of the book, because I think it ties in here really well. He talks about leadership is like investing, it compounds.
Hmm.
And he says in here, he says, what matters most is what you do day by day over the long haul. And he
Right.
talks about his friend Tag Short maintains the secret of our success is found in our daily agenda. If you continually invest in your leadership development, letting your assets compound, the inevitable result is growth over time. What can you see when you look at the person's daily agenda? We're going to see priorities, passion, abilities, relationships,
Hmm.
attitude, personal discipline, vision, and influence. See what a person is doing day after day, and you'll know what that you'll know, and who that person is. You'll know who that person is and who they are becoming.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, with an organization willing to invest in their team members, to say, hey, they may not even stay with us, but we're going to help them become a more well-rounded individual, and again, lay that foundation for
Hmm.
them to step into a leadership role when one comes available. I mean, I just think that is really that's investing, and
It is.
that is going to return, is going to compound.
Oh, phenomenally! And the thing that will do as well, Al, is that it will encourage other existing leaders to want to grow and develop too. All right,
Hmm.
and as I say, it's going to be a 4-tier program that's going to go all the way through from emerging leaders to executives eventually, and so that's going to wash through because it has to go all the way through the operation, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you get the law of the lid coming in, which is another law. But one of the executives who was in the audience on Monday, he said, I saw him today, and he said He said, wow, he said, you know, I was watching those presentations, and he said it made me feel lazy because we're not doing those things. I'm not doing those
Mm.
things. And
Mhm.
you can do it now, right? And learn it. And so we all need that reminder, because we all can get complacent if we don't invest in our own growth, right? If we don't be intentional about it. You know, we talk about, do you want to do it by design or default, right?
Right.
And what happens, we switch into the default and we forget that if we're intentional and we do it by design, we're going to keep growing and
Mhm.
continually improve. We're going to encourage others to do the same, and then that consistency compounding makes a massive difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
Massive difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, and again, we've talked about this before, but this sort of transitions into one last part we'll cover here today, and that's leaders are learners, right?
Hmm.
And he talked Bennis and Nanis, which is Warren Bennis and Bert Nanis said this. It is the capacity to develop and improve their skills that distinguishes leaders from their followers.
Yeah.
And I think, you and I have run into this in both of our businesses in the past and even recently, where we've spoken to leaders and they had no interest in
Yeah.
developing themselves, no interest in investing in their teams. To the simple comment, and I know I mentioned this before, and I'm not, and I don't want anybody listening to this think I'm angry or anything about this, because I'm not. I honestly, at the end of the day, it's your business. You do what you want to do. But it blows my mind when I hear somebody say, we're good. I've been doing this for 30 years. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And when I hear that, that
Hmm.
is the lid on the organization. I see
Correct.
that organization is actually it's actually dying, and they don't know it yet.
Hmm.
They may have they may still make sales and deal with customers and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, they've capped their level of success.
Right.
And during COVID, a lot of retail businesses had like two of the best, especially home goods and stuff like that, because people couldn't travel. They were spending money on their home. Home goods retailers had 2 years of unbelievable profits and sales,
Hmm.
like astronomical increases across the board. Millions of dollars in some stores a year in sales increases during COVID because people redirected their funds. However, what's happening now?
Right.
Decreases, right?
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
people shifted the money that they did have to travel over the last two
Hmm.
years because they could travel again. And then interest rates are up, you know,
Cost of
disposable
living.
income,
Yeah.
cost of living's up,
Yeah.
fuel prices, food prices,
Hmm.
energy prices, everything has gone up. So that disposable income that's spent in some of the retailers that I've dealt with has dried up. People just don't
Yeah.
have the money for it. I don't need a new sofa and love seat. I don't. I'll fix my refrigerator instead of buying a new one. So they've capped their organization's success level, the law of the lid, which Chris talked about earlier. And if you want more
Hmm.
information on that, go grab John's book. He describes it very well in there. Um, but the law of the lid has come into play in their minds because they aren't willing
Right.
to invest. So I mean,
Yeah.
my ranting done here. It's great to see a company like Disney, and that should be our model and our example, right? Are they a perfect organization? No, of course
No.
not. It's a massive company with
Yeah.
lots of moving parts. But, and you might say, well, they have lots of money. They can afford to do this. Well, you know what? They have budgets just like you do in your
Oh.
business. And
Yeah.
they plan and budget for things like this, just like any business can do, is plan and budget for stuff like this.
Yeah.
And you need to do that. You
Yeah.
need to find the discretionary funds to invest in the next generation of leaders, the
Right.
up and coming leaders, your existing leaders, and be a learner, because you know what? That's going to distinguish you from the people that you're leading. Anyways.
Absolutely. Well, and if you're not moving forward or growing, you're actually going backwards, right? Because others are going to be growing around you,
Mhm.
and then you're losing that momentum, and then it's harder to pick it up. And if you're not learning, you're getting behind the times, because, let's face it, we talked about COVID, and COVID was what, 4 years, 3.5, 4 years ago now.
Mhm.
Um, the world has changed. right?
drastically.
People were saying, "Oh, we'll go back to normal after it." We're not never going to go back to normal, right? Or to what that normal
What
was. We're
is
in a
not?
new normal, right? We're in a
Yeah,
new normal,
yeah.
and
What is
rightly so. And I actually look at COVID and say, obviously the human cost aside, it was
Mhm.
actually a good thing for a lot of organizations because it made them stop and rethink, right? It made that buzzword at the time, which was pivot, right?
Pivot.
It made them pivot. And a lot of those things they pivoted to at the time have stuck now,
Mhm.
right? And they've made them better if they're learning from it and then growing from it. But you have to continually learn because the world is changing
Yes.
and the workforce is changing.
Mhm.
When you look at millennials and Gen Zs, they're different to your Gen X and baby boomers, right?
Yes.
And therefore, we have to, excuse me, adapt our styles to that to get the best out of them, right? And realize that they want to follow a company that's got a purpose,
Mhm.
right? That's got a passion. That
That's socially responsible,
correct.
that's giving back, that cares about their workers, that's giving flexibility in their schedules to
Yeah,
be able to do the things they love to do. And
yeah,
again, we don't understand those things. Again, we're just behind the times.
right.
And so anyway, Chris, I think great discussion here. This went way better than I thought it would when we started out. But just to we want to just again throw out a question to you to think about as we wrap things up here today. So we were talking about the law of process and just the importance of that leadership does develop daily, not in a day. So again, my
Mhm.
challenge is to those listening, ask this question and answer this question honestly about yourself. How are you intentionally growing as a leader? Do you have a plan for that?
Right.
And if not, then I want to challenge you to get one. And if you're unsure and you're stuck, reach out to Chris and I. We'll help you. We will coach
Yeah.
business. We do coach businesses. So if you're stuck, reach out to us. We will
Right.
be happy to help. Not for free because we're a business too, but we'd be happy to have a
Right.
conversation with you for free and see where you're at, and
Absolutely.
then potentially come alongside with you, aside you, and
Yeah.
walk with you. We've just recently onboarded a new client we're very anxious to get working with. I'm very excited about their desire to grow and their willingness to invest in themselves
Mhm.
uh, with us to help them get to where they want to go. So
Yeah.
and we're open to helping other businesses with that as well. So
Right, and individuals too, right? We've got our,
and
our Facebook groups, right?
yeah,
So even just come and join the Facebook groups. They're free, right?
yeah,
So the
exactly.
only thing you're investing there is your time and effort.
Yeah,
And
and
so we
Chris,
got Raise Your Bars,
raise your
Personal
bars
Growth
personal.
Solutions, Raise Your Bars Business Builders, and then the one for the over 40 males, the legacy creators.
Yes,
So feel free to come and join those. We do some teaching in those. In fact, we're going to be doing one for next week for like a year end sort of push.
exactly.
Um,
We've got
so
2 months
so come and
left.
join us. Look us on Facebook.
Yes, please join us there. We'd love to see you. Love to connect with you. And again, if you got some value out of this podcast, A, please subscribe to Chris's
Mhm.
or mine. And B, share it with your family, friends,
Yeah,
coworkers. We would love,
please.
and we'd love to hear your feedback. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. Have an amazing day. Once again, this is Chris Baker with Al Rutan and our Raise Your Bars podcast. Take care.